The BBC invites you to meet Joyce Grenfell. In this programme, she's talking to Leslie Smith and Harold Hobson, and starts by telling us when she first decided to make the stage her career. Joyce Grenfell.
I remember an actual moment when I was about 11, lying in the bath one day and thinking, wouldn't it be marvellous to be an actress? But I didn't think in terms of acting. I just thought it would be marvellous to be an actress.
You thought of no particular actress. Did you go to the theatre a great deal?
Yes, I did. My family were very, very interested in the theatre. My father was an architect, and he loved the theatre above all else. And my mother was a great loss to the stage. She would have been a marvellous actress, but she never did. And, you know, my family took it seriously. I remember being very much in love with both Ivan Novello and Noel Coward at the same time.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I've got a brother. He's 4 years younger than me, an American citizen. He lives in New York with 2 children.
You are part American yourself, aren't you?
I'm actually quite a lot more than part. My mother was entirely American. She came from Virginia. And my father's mother was American, and she came from Rhode Island. But although she was American, she married an Englishman, and she was the first woman, I think, to be chairman of a committee on the London County Council.
What committee was she chairman of?
Education.
Would you say that you had what might be called a well-to-do background, a well-to-do upbringing?
I suppose you would call it that. It wasn't a very affluent, but there was enough to go round. We didn't have a car. We did have help in the house. I went to boarding school. I never lacked for anything, but it wasn't lavish. We never went abroad for holidays until I was 15, I think.
You say you went to boarding school. Was this a happy experience?
Yes, I loved school. I'm a sort of freak. I loved school, and I loved doing matinees.
Did you ever get into trouble?
No, I was rather goody-goody. But I never was a head girl or a prefect. I was head of the dorm.
What did that involve you in?
Well, I can't remember, really, but I know that we weren't supposed to talk after lights out, but I rather think I did a little bit. I used to say, do shut up. You know, we're supposed to be quiet, and I don't think it's frightfully fair if we're not. You know, I was just like my characters.
Did you enjoy
the schoolgirl character that I did later in life was entirely autobiographical. I mean, I was the kind of girl who said, well, I don't think it's fair. I think we ought to actually all more or less kind of get together and, you know, try and do the decent thing.
Stiff upper lip.
I was very like that.
Did you make lasting friendships at school?
Yes, I did. I still see some of the people I was at school with. In fact, I think my oldest, closest friend I've known since I was 7.
Did you take much part yourself in school theatricals?
Yes, I always had to play a man, though, because I was the tallest.
Is your experience at the age of 11 of longing to be an actress, is that your earliest memory of wanting to act, or have you an earlier one?
No, I haven't. I don't think I wanted to act, you see. I must make that clear. I just wanted to be an actress. It seemed to me a glamorous thing to be. No, I do remember, at the age of about 3, actually enjoying being looked and laughed at. I was lost on board a ship crossing the Atlantic and found dancing to the ship's orchestra. And apparently I was dancing with my eyes shut, pretending I didn't know what was going on, but I knew full well that they were looking and laughing and finding it funny, and I loved it. But I didn't really want to go on the stage later. When I was 17, I went to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art for 3 months only. And because I'd been to school in France, my father thought it would be a good idea if I took the French class. There was a whole sort of course of French acting in those days under that wonderful woman, Madame Gachet. And Celia Johnson was in the play I was in, and I had to sing in it. I was a shepherdess, and I had a song that was set so high that you practically couldn't hear it. The key was so out of range, however I sang it, and that was really all I ever did at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. And then I met my husband.
Oh yes, you didn't leave school with the stage as a definite career in mind.
I've always had a terrific tussle between wanting to draw and wanting to write. Those were the 2 things. The acting was rather an extra, but I did always want to draw, and I always thought I was going to draw, and when I left school, I went to an art school. I went to the Westminster School and did the evening classes there.
You grew up in an atmosphere of drawing. Your father,
yes,
at any rate, your father was an architect.
He was an architect, and as a young man, he was a caricaturist. He did quite a lot, and then he outgrew it. He suddenly didn't want to do it anymore.
Did this influence you at all?
I suppose so. I'm sure that my father influenced me enormously his passion in life was sense of proportion. And I believe a sense of humour is the same thing as a sense of proportion. And he always used to say, stand back and look at it. And of course, by the time you've stood back and looked at it, the thing falls into place.
You got married quite young, didn't you? You were in the 19...
Cradle snatched. I'm still married, yes.
The same marriage?
Yes, the same marriage. I can recommend it.
You look very happy indeed. Yes.
Well, yes, I am. I'm married to an extremely nice man and a very patient man, because I don't think it could be easy to be married to somebody like me. But he's wonderful in that he's amused and enthusiastic about what I do. And he encourages me, and he's become interested in theatre, very much so.
Although he's a businessman.
Yes, he's a businessman, but he's a director of a stage management company, and is amused by it,
Oh, yes.
and interested in it.
Did you have a fairly prosperous start to your marriage?
No, we started very humbly. Well, humbly for those days. We started in a very small house on, I don't think you could call it a lavish income, £750 a year, and we had this just shows how things have changed.
This was
1929, a 6-bedroomed house in Chelsea, and 3 resident maids.
Not really very humble.
3 maids.
Quite extraordinary. I must say, I must qualify the maids a little bit. One was 15 years old and came from Durham. And I had a cook who wore a musical comedy black velvet Merry Widow hat. I was so scared when I interviewed her that I took the first one that came. And she was a fairly ruthless character. And I discovered that she really wasn't feeding the little girl from Durham at all. And the third was a Swiss a girl who is still a great friend, who'd come to look after me when I was growing up, and my mother, and who was the most beautiful dressmaker, and she used to make all our clothes. So it wasn't quite, it wasn't a very sort of formal house or anything like that. And the lady in the picture hat went awfully soon.
You didn't have to work yourself,
I
did you?
didn't in the beginning, but I did have to later. By this time we'd moved to the country in a little house. If we wanted to go on keeping the little car and leading that sort of life, then I had to contribute too. And I was we didn't have any children. At first I hoped I was going to, and I didn't later. And I suppose I was sad when I was young. I'm not a bit sad now. And the the recompensations. That isn't a word, really, is it? It's rather nice.
There should be a word.
Yes.
Let us invent it
Yes.
at this moment.
Well,
A
the recompensations
Yes.
were have been wonderful. And my husband and I have been able to go away a great deal together. And when I've made these exciting tours around the world, the last 2 to Australia, he's been able to come out at the end when I've finished work and join me. And we've had a holiday out there. All things I might not have been able to do, if we'd had a family.
What was your first job?
My first job was in Herbert Fargen's Little Review in 1939, and I got it entirely by accident. I met Fargen at a party at which somebody had said to me, do that little sketch you did the other night at dinner. I hadn't ever done a little sketch as far as I knew, but I had been telling a story about a Women's Institute lecturer. And I did it at this party, and Fargen liked it and asked me if I'd write it down and eventually do it in his review. And after saying I didn't a bit want to, which was quite genuine, I didn't want to go on the stage. I was very happy living quietly in the country. I was persuaded, and I went into the theatre, and that's what happened.
I remember this, not on the first night, but very soon after the first night. I remember thinking, with a sinking of the heart, how improbable it was that a lady coming onto the stage with no help from the orchestra or the girls in the review, thinking how dull it would be, and what a revelation it was, and what a triumph.
Oh, that's a nice thing to
And
hear.
in fact, I think that in the theatre, in the modern theatre, it was you, and not beyond the fringe, that invented satire.
That's
Wouldn't you agree that your programme was... You're becoming
I
very
think
fierce
so.
now.
No, I'm
Joyce
not.
Grenfell.
I'm
Yes.
beaming because I think
Oh, this is
that.
pleasure.
Oh yes, I
Good.
think what I did and what I do is satire. I hold that you can dig much more deeply and lastingly with gentle satire than within the kind that actually withers away
Yes,
the
with
subject.
a kindly satire, with
I
a
think-
background
yes,
of charity.
I think so.
I quite agree.
Gentle and kindly because you like people, don't
Because
you?
I like people and because I perhaps care about the thing I'm satirizing enough to wish either to protect it or to...
But there are human qualities that you do regard as real targets, aren't there?
I think so. I think absolute folly,
When you say absolute folly,
well, nitwittedness. I suppose. And I think superiority, arrogance, those are all subjects I think are absolutely legitimate. And I think affectation and self-consciousness are things that you can get at.
Do you think these have to be separated from the people manifesting them, so that the attack is actually upon the quality and not upon the person?
Yes, I do. I think that's really what it is. It's always that, actually, isn't it? It is the quality that you're interested in. The way a person speaks fascinates me too. I never learnt anything at school because I was so busy watching the way the teacher spoke. Couldn't actually hear what she said. You know, I mean, the way the mouth went down in the corner, or little sort of funny play with the lips
And the noise that comes out, presumably.
Yes, the noise that came out, yes. I'm very interested in sounds of voices. I believe that we can have uglier voices in England than anywhere in the world, and it isn't just my loyal American blood rising up when I say that I don't think what are known as those hideous American voices can compete at all with what I would call maybe a Kensington or a mid-morning coffee voice. You know the kind I mean, it comes out very, very flat and has a sort of penetrating quality. Actually, I think that is one of the ugliest sounds in the world.
What I find is that the English voice has a greater range of octaves than the American voice. This I notice particularly on the stage. That English players do have a wider range of tone.
Yes, I think that's very true. I was thinking really of the nasal quality more than that very, very monotonous thing, of course, is what I was doing in that voice.
Yes.
That is the ugly sound, isn't it? But not all American voices. I mean, it depends very much what you mean, doesn't it? I mean, down in the South, you get a good deal of variety down there, where they make a statement into a question.
This is very
You
true.
know?
Do
You
you
certainly have got on a pretty little hat.
How far do you regard yourself as impersonating? How far do you have in mind a particular person, a particular character for any of your parts?
Quite honestly, I've never deliberately set out to do a person. I may have taken an ingredient of a person, added to another ingredient, but you know, if you're actually imitating a recognizable person, unless everybody knows the person, it's not necessarily recognizable. Therefore, if I can find a character that represents everybody's aunt, or everybody's Grand Duchess, do you see what I mean? It's much more likely to be recognized than an individual.
But does everybody's aunt ever recognize herself, or does she think this is everybody else's aunt?
I think she thinks it's everybody else's aunt. That's my hope. And in fact, it has been my experience.
No one has ever accused you, as it were, of mimicking.
I did once, quite unselfconsciously, and I mean that quite honestly, unselfconsciously, find that somebody I knew had crept into a character. And I found years later, because I'm very fond of this person, that she had thought I was getting at her and had minded at the time. But I wasn't, and I was able to put that quite straight. But I think I'd simply picked up the sound of her voice, and it fitted in with the character I was writing.
Here's a difficulty you must have been faced with often, you must be very conscious of. I wonder how you manage to avoid losing sight of Joyce Grenfell.
Oh, I hardly know her by sight. I suppose I always find that when I was writing for radio, this was the great fun, because you can entirely forget what you look like, and, long, thin, and suggest all sorts of things with your voice and with with the ideas. On the stage it's more difficult, and I use a minimum of props, a hat perhaps, or a scarf or something like that, and I'm not sure that I always am able to suggest the character that I have so very clearly in my mind. But I suppose one always comes through a bit as yourself.
You were saying that as a girl at school you did find in yourself many qualities which you have been able to make very good and amusing use of on the stage.
Yes. Bits of me, as in everything I do. I think it must be, mustn't it?
Yes, one must stand on one's own shadow, as it were.
I mean, it's one's signature, isn't it? But you know, a real actress, a wonderful actress, for instance, like Peggy Ashcroft, who never appears the same. I think that's the marvel of it. I mean, she actually looks different when she's playing these different parts.
Am I right in thinking that you did have a professional interest in writing before you actually earned any livelihood from the
Yes,
stage?
rather casual. I think I was what they call a late developer. I did a lot of drawing when I was young, and I wasn't very good. I think I might have been better. I still do a little sketching entirely for my own pleasure, to record places and things of that sort. There's nothing like it for enjoyment. But I started writing verse. Occasionally it was almost a poem, but verse when I was about 25.
What sort of verse?
Light verse. Punch took some.
Can you remember a verse?
Alas, I don't believe I could actually quote any. I wrote rather a heart-feeling little piece about people coming to stay for the weekend. It was called Oh Blessed Monday Morning. I can't remember how it went, but something like When the house is mine once more and visitors with baggage have departed through the door. I liked my friends on Friday night. On Saturday the same. I still delight on Sunday that they came. But blessed Monday morning when the house is mine once more.
And you extended your writing interest, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Well, then I became a journalist. You see, I became the radio critic on The Observer.
This was in the days when radio criticism was a very early...
It had just begun, I believe there were two other critics, and they were both women, oddly enough. One was, matter of fact, I don't remember who it was, on the Manchester Guardian, as it then was, and the other was Grace Wyndham Goldie on The Listener. It was great fun. I loved it. I love radio. I still love radio.
Did it actually make you want to go on the radio yourself, or were you satisfied to enjoy what others were doing?
Quite satisfied to enjoy what others were doing, and I did a great deal of sewing at the time.
So this was not the way you became an actress?
You see, one of the reasons, I think it's like playing golf, they all say swing easy, don't they, if you're really going to send the ball a long way. I think the reason perhaps that it went so easily and well for me from the beginning, without sort of struggle to find it, is that I didn't particularly want to do it. I always thought of myself, you see, by this time as a writer. And I've had such fun because my job is both writing and doing. But I have a feeling perhaps the writing will take over. You know.
What was your first radio appearance?
I think it was a tea time programme from Bristol during the war. And I think I did the Women's Institute sketch.
Of course, since those early days on radio, you've done a tremendous lot. How do you find it? Do you enjoy it compared with the stage, compared with films, compared with television?
You know, I always enjoy every medium while I'm actually working on it, but of course there's nothing to touch the stage. This is the exciting thing. I mean, the audience is there and you're there, and between you make something happen. I suppose that's true, really, of radio, but it isn't so apparent to yourself. I find it absolutely thrilling to go out onto a stage and make contact. The audience really, in fact, is doing at least half the work.
So you think that every appearance is an entirely separate, unique occasion and performance.
And the fun of being able to try it again.
Yes, the thing is recreated each night.
People have said to me sometimes, how on earth can you bear to go out there and do the same thing night after night after night? And I say, but look, I've got something I think is funny or pleasing or touching or something, and I've got somebody new to show it to. And also another chance to improve on it.
Have you ever had stage fright?
No. I've never had stage fright. I sometimes have stage fright in my dreams just before I open. I have a recurring dream before a new show opens. It's that I'm always wearing the wrong clothes in the wrong theatre, acting a play that I don't know the words of.
Now, what about the relationship you have with your public off stage? How do you enjoy being recognized? How do you enjoy being greeted by people you don't know?
I find it friendly. People say awfully funny things to you, too, sometimes. It's a passport, you know. I think being recognized is a two-edged sword in a way. I'm not that recognizable. I remember once talking to a very famous film star who said to me, you see, I simply can't go into a shop. I cannot go into a shop. Do you know what a deprivation that is? And I can imagine. She simply found that it was impossible.
But when you are recognized, and this must be very, very often, do you not sometimes feel that you would like greater privacy?
Only when I'm looking rather peculiar. Otherwise, it's, you know.
You don't find it terrifying if people come right
No, I'm not a very self-conscious person. I'm very lucky. I must say it does happen in terribly funny places, though, sometimes. I remember we were in a car that broke down once in southern Rhodesia. This was some years ago. And some young men were coming by. I think in a jeep or something, and they got out to help to push the car. I was with some people who lived out there, and suddenly they spotted me. And they simply couldn't believe it that we were all together, you know, in the middle of Rhodesia. People don't believe you exist, you see, if they've seen you on paper. That's the thing.
Now, where had these people in Rhodesia seen you?
Oh, I suppose
in
the film,
theatre,
don't you think?
In the film?
I suppose
Yes.
so.
Would you say you're a religious person?
Yes, I am. Yes, I'm interested in Christian Science, and I am. Oh, indeed, yes. It informs my whole outlook
Informs your whole outlook, and does it influence your attitude to work?
entirely.
In what way?
Well, now, here we go into very deep waters. I suppose, if you believe in ultimate truth, I suppose if you believe in good being the most powerful influence there is, this is bound to colour everything you do. I suppose you could come back and say to me, yes, but then how about satirising people? I don't honestly know. I don't take the satirising side of it that seriously, except I do not wish to destroy anybody.
But you only satirise qualities which are in themselves, in however small
Yes,
a
that's
degree,
true.
undesirable and
That's
evil,
it. I
which
think
is
so.
separated from
Or
the...
foolish,
or
not
foolish,
necessarily
really.
evil. Foolish, perhaps.
Undesirable.
Yes, undesirable.
Yes.
You know, a word like joy is a word you can't use very much. It embarrasses people to talk about joy, but I think a sense of joy is something that comes from believing in something outside yourself.
But the sense of joy you refer to slightly surprises me. I was going to ask you something that might in fact shock you. I was going to say that some of your characters have strong pathos, and you yourself sometimes look a little sad. Are you a melancholy person, ever?
Not at all, no, I'm not a bit sad. I can be very touched and very moved. But I think if you believe that fundamentally all is well in spite of what you see with your physical eye,
Well-
if you know that there is a law operating, if you believe there is a law operating, you can't be sad for very long.
What most moves you to sadness?
Courage. And I found, looking at the characters that I was doing that had apparently touched other people, I do a song called Three Brothers, about an unmarried older woman looking back on her life with her three brothers. This is a pathetic character in a way. One feels she's missed out on everything. But she is totally unself-conscious of her courage, but she's been brave about it. And in fact, her life has been entirely fulfilled because she's been looking after other people. I'm not nearly as noble as that.
You did, however, look after other people during the war, didn't you? You worked for the Red Cross.
My real job in the war was entertaining in hospitals and isolated units all over the world. And what a wonderful job. Doing something I happen to like doing in all sorts of exciting places and feeling that, one was being really stretched.
Do you find that your attitude changes as time goes on? I mean, is the serious part of your work? You spoke of this.
Yes, I
the
do a bit. I think
Three
it
Brothers.
gets more difficult to be funny as one gets older. I still think things are much funnier than ever. And but I do find it more difficult to write funny things.
Why is
Not all the time. Well, I think because as you get older, or wiser or more compassionate or something, you see why things are funny, and that's kind of sad.
I suppose you find the stage provides you with a real relationship. You spoke of the relationship you have with the audience. I suppose television and radio, by comparison, must seem very artificial to you.
Except that in a way, a big audience is never more than one person at a time.
But can you regard the microphone as your one person?
Yes, I can.
You don't find this artificial?
No, not a bit, because
How-
I know somebody's listening. Well,
How-
I mean, I hope somebody's listening.
But if you are doing a sketch on the radio or on television entirely by yourself with no actual visible and audible reaction from the audience, surely this does affect the timing.
No,
doesn't
because
it?
that's how it's written. I write triangularly, if you see what I mean. I write, A, me, is talking to B, observed by C. You see? I don't need an audience. In fact, I
So-
don't really like an audience for a broadcast. I don't like an audience.
Oh, no,
because
no,
you
no,
can't
but
time
you do get
right.
it in the... you can't time it right.
No.
Mhm.
And when I write a sketch, which I don't ever sit down and write, I work it out loud and then finally make notes and then finally get a script. And when I look at the script, as I finally write it and then look at it 3 months after I've been doing the sketch, it's very, very changed, because I find I do create it as I go, you know,
Yes.
add bits and pieces. But I'm always surprised where the laughs come. I remember in one of those Shirley's Girlfriend sketches that I did about going to dance at the Palais de Dance, I had a line which was, he's got lovely manners, you know. He says, may I be permitted to divest you of your plastic knack? Well, I thought that was a very, very big laugh. And then there came a line in which we were talking about, we sat down, we had a nice tea, and all of a sudden he leaned across the table and he took hold of my hand and he said, you've got provocative eyes. I see his Kafka in the beet salad, but I didn't say nothing. Well, to me the joke was provocative eyes, but the beet salad was a much, much bigger laugh. And it nearly threw me the first night. And I put it in because it was true. It was what she'd seen. You know, I'll see his
Yes.
Kafka in the beet salad. But you know, that terrible thing of although you're carried away and this is a big moment, you can't help noticing the little details.
Your concern with the human predicament on the stage is something you carry into your private interests, isn't it? You do a lot for charity.
Things I'm interested in.
What particular things?
Well, you have to take a choice, I think. You know, you get asked to do everything. The things that interest me are the young and the elderly.
Apart from helping such good works, what do you most enjoy doing with your money?
I rather like clothes. I don't have a very great many, but what I have I like. I like them to be very comfortable, and I hope they help in some way. I would spend a great deal of money on flowers. I love to have fresh flowers around the house. I don't know what I spend money on. Books, buy a lot of books. I like luxuries. I like being comfortable, but I don't want grandeur. You know the difference? I mean, I've got a tiny kitchen, but it's got everything I want in it. And I would hate to have a big house. And I would hate to have a big place in the country. I really would hate it. I remember once, when I was quite young, a rather irritated cousin saying to me, you know, you make me so mad because there was a revolution you wouldn't mind. Because, you know, I wrote a character once in an American she's supposed to be a shop girl in New York, and she's talking about a friend of hers called Olga Pulowski. She's got no ambition. She says from the bottom, you've got no place to fall off of from.
In that program, Joyce Grenfell has been talking to Leslie Smith and Harold Hobson.